Great men are not born great, they grow great. The Godfather. Welcome to EOS Weekly. Last week, we put out a video on EOSForce, which is a sister chain that is young, but has some innovative ideas, and is gaining momentum in the Eastern Hemisphere. Prior to our video, there wasn't much awareness about this chain in the West yet, and our video helped to bring a lot of attention to this EOSForce project for the first time for much of the English-speaking side of the EOS community. There's a lot of good coming out of this newfound attention, but there's also been some frustrations. Let's start with the frustrations and then we'll move on to the good things. So, it turns out that in recent months, there had been discussions underway among the EOSForce community about what to do with accounts on the EOSForce blockchain that still had zero activity. These discussions were primarily among the Asian community, and very little of this conversation made its way back to the English-speaking channels. The EOSForce chain launched back on June 22nd, so it's a little more than 6 months old now. At the time of the launch, the EOSForce founding team didn't have all this planned out ahead of time in terms of how to deal with inactive accounts. The Telos founding team, in comparison, did a good job of planning out upfront what to do with accounts that don't end up showing any interest in their blockchain. As we covered in our Telos launch video a few weeks ago, Telos publicized a 1-year threshold for account activity, where if Genesis token holders don't perform any activities prior to this important milestone, they forfeit their Telos tokens. Because EOSForce did not have anything like this planned out ahead of time, around October and early November, the EOSForce block producers started putting together proposals as to how to handle the inactive accounts. There were a lot of discussions happening in the Chinese EOSForce community around this topic, but like we said, little of this made its way back to the Western Hemisphere, which up until now, the Western English-speaking side of the EOSForce community has been minuscule, virtually non-existent. Several BP proposals were published in the EOSForce Weekly report that came out in late November as to how inactive accounts should be handled. You can see proposals by some of the top EPs such as CCBC, EOS Awake, and JIQIX, but they didn't reach a final consensus. Up here at the top of this section, it says, Supernodes failed to reach consensus on the proposal to destruct inactivated assets on the EOSForce mainnet. And scrolling back to the top of the report in the summary here, it says, Consensus was not reached due to unsettled disputes over the issue. Community and BPs will consider more variables before proposing new solutions. But then, on November 29th, the EOSForce BPs did reach a consensus. On this date, the BPs voted on and passed a proposal to freeze 80% of the tokens in the accounts that still had no activities. This went into effect on December 20th during a mainnet upgrade. Our video on EOSForce went out on December 21st. The report you're looking at here didn't come out until December 23rd, 2 days after our video on EOSForce was published. Unfortunately, we didn't have access to the information on this 80% freeze at the time of our last recording. And we didn't experience the freeze anecdotally, as the freeze happened just after we had done our research. The timing of our last video couldn't have been worse in regards to this freeze. The video went out the day after the freeze. So it's been a lackluster of a welcoming party that our viewers got over the last week when they went in to activate their EOSForce accounts for the first time. For those who participated in the EOS ICO, these Genesis account holders were only seeing 20% of the tokens that they were expecting to see in their EOSForce accounts. This has caused and is continuing to cause confusion, frustration, and a bit of outrage, which is understandable. Our apologies for the timing on this, and for any frustration this has caused. We did put an appeal into the EOSForce Telegram chat, which you can see here, and we'll read that out loud now. Hello, EOSForce community. It's understandable that after a certain amount of time, those in the Genesis snapshot who haven't performed any actions would lose access to their tokens. The other chains have similar policies. Telos, for example, has a 1-year deadline for Genesis holders to perform at least one action. Being that many of us in the West are just now becoming familiar with EOSForce, it would be worth considering doing something similar. For example, putting a deadline of June 22nd, 2019 as the 1-year mark where token holders must have performed at least one action. My concern is that the 80% freeze was too early and didn't give those in the West enough time to become familiar with your blockchain. And at the crucial time when EOSForce should be expanding to a global presence, this 80% freeze can and will cause a backlash in the West. The sooner this 80% freeze is removed, the better. The good news coming out of all of the activity this past week is that the EOSForce community is acknowledging the communication gap. It has led them to start working on this, the EOSForce Global Community Forum, the bridge between Eastern and Western communities. This will enable the global community to submit proposals to the EOSForce block producers. It sounds like this is specifically being geared towards the English-speaking side of the EOS community, which is exactly what we need from this chain right now. JC Zhang is the admin in the EOSForce English-speaking Telegram channel. Since our video last week, the activity in this channel has significantly increased, and JC Zhang has been very helpful in getting people's questions answered. English-speaking block producers from EOSForce are also now starting to come into this chat as well. And in this December 25th message from JC Zhang, he's reporting that EOSForce is now starting to get some BPs in the Western Hemisphere expressing interest in becoming a BP on EOSForce, and for you to DM him if interested. We don't know yet who these BPs are. If you happen to be one of them, a BP in the West who we all know and trust, we'd love to rally behind you to help get you elected into an active spot in the EOSForce chain. Getting at least one of our fluid English-speaking Western BPs involved with EOSForce would be a healthy thing. It would be a huge help towards bridging the communication gap and the cultural gap between East and West. If you are one of these BPs who is interested in this, please reach out to us. You can DM EOS Weekly on Twitter or on Telegram, and this way we can help get the Western Hemisphere to rally behind you. As we explained in our last video on the EOSForce blockchain, the tokenomics are set up in such a way that the token holders who vote for and help get an underdog standby BP into an elected spot stand to profit more so from the voter rewards than just voting for a BP who is already at the top of the list. It would be an interesting experiment to see firsthand how this plays out. So, BPs, if this is you, please don't be shy about letting us know of your intentions. Also, to everyone who participated in the EOS ICO and who has been impacted by the 80% freeze on EOSForce, please keep in mind that the 80% freeze is just that, a freeze. Nothing permanent has transpired. The greater concern from the EOSForce community that caused them to move forward with this freeze was the potential for whale accounts to crash the token price with sudden dumping. Through the opening up of these communication lines, and especially if we can get some Western BPs elected into active spots, there's the potential for us to get this freeze lifted, at least for the common non-whale token holders. Ashe Oro has also invited EOSForce to come on his radio show for an interview, and they have accepted. Thank you, Ashe, for arranging this, and we'll be excited to hear how this interview goes. We've added a link to Ashe's channel below. It's a new channel that's just getting started, but Ashe and his partner Zane from Freedom Proxy do a great job with the panel discussion format, and they tend to get a lot of prominent members from the EOS community on their show for interesting discussions. In terms of our show here, as we close out 2018 and look forward to 2019, our plan for the foreseeable future is to keep monitoring the EOS mainnet along with all the forks of the EOS.io codebase, the sister chains, and report on any significant innovations here on our channel. Because if we zoom out and look at things from the 10,000-foot perspective, what's happening here is the open source community is truly embracing the EOS.io codebase. The open source community must be seeing a lot of value in what the Bytemaster and Block 1 has created here. And it would appear that EOS.io is quickly becoming the best starting point for the next generation of blockchains, similar to the position that the Bitcoin codebase has been in over the past decade. But what the open source community also appears to have recognized in EOS.io, besides its many advantages, is what the greatest flaw is with the EOS model. If we look at some of the drama playing out on the EOS mainnet, and then look at the focus of the new sister chains that are spinning up. The common issue that they are focused on fixing is this: cartel susceptibility. How to prevent BP cartels from forming. The open source community is recognizing that the greatest weakness of EOS, and ultimately of DPoS in general, is their susceptibility to cartels forming. And therefore, this is the most urgent area where the brainpower is being focused. Cartels have the potential to destroy the decentralization of a DPoS blockchain, and with this, in turn, destroy Byzantine fault tolerance. The open source community knows this is the greatest threat. They've recognized this, and they're working on solutions for it. They know that just putting a stamp on your DPoS blockchain that says no cartels allowed is not a viable long-term solution. Instead, these communities are trying to solve the cartel issue more at the fundamental level, at the tokenomics level, changing how incentives are aligned and how votes are weighed. Hopefully the drama around this 80% freeze won't overshadow some of the innovative approaches that EOSForce is taking towards cartel prevention. For starters, we need to get the big engineering brains here in the West to start analyzing the voter incentive dividend model that EOSForce has brought to the table. There aren't any signs this is happening just yet, but it's still early. The next sister chain coming along that is attempting to crush cartels in an innovative way is EOS. EOS. We have our eye on EOS and we'll be covering it in detail in future episodes. EOS is making some promising enhancements to DPoS with what they call Delegated Proof of Importance, DPOI. And going forward, EOS will be another sister chain, along with Telos and EOSForce, that'll be on our radar as we analyze and compare all these EOSIO chains. Nobody knows what the mature, cartel-resistant version of DPoS will look like. There are no experts. Blockchain and DPoS are too new. And we're trying to build blockchains right now that'll last for decades, if not centuries. The way forward is to let 1,000 flowers bloom, to study them, to cross-pollinate them, to keep what works and discard what doesn't. Thought experiments are great, but real-world EOSIO blockchains with real communities behind them, the learning potential from these sister chains is invaluable. This will be our focus at EOS Weekly as we move into 2019, watching for innovations in the various EOSIO chains as they spin up, comparing how well different approaches are working, and also comparing all these EOS chains with the non-EOS chains. Thank you to all of our viewers who have helped to turn this channel into a success in 2018. We've appreciated all the subscribers and all the positive comments here on YouTube and on Twitter, and we'll strive to keep bringing you high-quality EOS content throughout 2019. Thanks, and we'll see you next week right here on EOS Weekly.